Thanks, James. I do work for WPP, but I specifically work for Group M. I'm based in the US, and I have a history in digital advertising and digital advertising operations. I am going to speak about viewability, but I wanted to say that viewability is part of a greater whole called brand safety, where it includes things like fraud, anti-piracy, privacy, ad blocking. Any risks that a brand faces in the digital supply chain falls under the area of brand safety. And I ran Group M Interaction in the US for about 10 years and ran operations there. But from September the 1st, I was appointed as Executive Vice President of Brand Safety globally. So my job is this. It is to protect our clients' brands against any risks in the digital supply chain. I think brands are generally worried. A lot of our brand managers and marketing managers and media managers are from the linear side of the business. And I think that their life was quite simple until about 5 years ago, when suddenly they were hit by fraud, viewability, piracy, privacy, and all of the issues. And it's made them quite worried. And what's very important about the brand safety position is we're here to say that we've taken this initiative to keep your brand safe in the digital supply chain, so you can move investment from the analog channels like television into digital. And so viewability is absolutely one of those. I remember having conversations with our clients 4 years ago when viewability first emerged, when Comscore came out with their claim that 50% of ads aren't viewed. And we had these uncomfortable conversations with clients to say, they start off with, and you never want to have these conversations, they start off with, do you mean to tell me? And do you mean to tell me that 50% of my ads are not being viewed? And these things break down trust in the digital supply chain and block investment from analog to digital. So we have to have them addressed. So let's talk about viewability and the importance of viewability, because it really is one of the brand risk areas, and it's one of the areas. One of my early conversations with a very large global client, who asked me to negotiate that they get their money back for the last 5 years for all the non-viewable impressions that have been served. So this is how seriously some of our clients regard this. Viewability absolutely already has or is about to hit the UK market and the European market. I was just saying to James a little earlier, we are rolling out viewability standards globally. One of the reasons why I'm here is because we're launching it globally this week. So it's happening. It really is happening. And I'm going to try and share with you some of the things that we've learned in the US. And I even have a slide where I hope to share some learnings that'll help you get prepared. So our assumption is predicated on the fact that an ad that is not viewed has no value. It might sound like an obvious point to you, but it's a very important point that we first make with our clients, because when we start talking about valuing a viewable ad, it has a different value to an impression that is just served. If you think about an impression that's served, it may be fraudulent, it may be non-viewable, it may be many other things, but I bet you that 95% of your agencies and your clients and your agency's clients are still measuring their ads on CPMs, which include all the bad stuff. And I think it's important, and we'll talk about it again a little later, it's important that we start measuring against the viewable ads, because that's where the value is. By the way, that's really good news for most of you, because I think most of you are from premium publishers. But let me just read this because I think it's useful. A viewable impression is defined as an ad unit that appears in view to a user, accounting for ad placement, screen size, screen resolution, exposure duration, and multiple browser tabs or multiple applications window open on a connected device. Remember that often, if you're on a desktop, there are often a number of windows that are open. Sometimes ads are served on a site on 2 or 3 windows deep. That's not a viewable ad. The consumer can't see that. So the viewable technology needs to take that into account. All right. So why do we need it? And some of these are going to be obvious. And also why? And I know that I'm speaking to UK publishers, but why should it be global? When I started in digital, I started as the global CEO of Mindshare Interaction when we first established it in 2004. We were still paying on first-party impressions, so whatever the publisher said had appeared, we paid on. And the first leap in digital measurement was the ability to pay off third-party impressions. There was often a 30 or a 35% discrepancy between third-party and first-party impressions. And so that was the first leap, but it didn't tell the whole story. A lot can happen between a served ad and a viewed ad. Some of them are technical, and some of them are simply when the ad may well appear out of frame, or the ad may not be an ad at all. It may be a bot. So around about 5 or 6 years ago, a company called RealView developed some technology that was able to measure the ad or the number of pixels or the amount of the ad that was in frame by measuring the pixels in frame. And that started an ability to move measurement forward. The other thing I'd like to make a point here as well is that often when we have these conversations with clients and they say, wow, you mean to tell me that 50% of my ads aren't viewable? Wow, digital is not a very efficient medium. And we need to point out that viewability isn't a digital phenomenon, it's a media phenomenon. If you walk out of the room when the television's ad when the television ad appears to make a cup of tea, when you page past an ad in a newspaper or a magazine, when you talk during a radio commercial, those aren't viewed, heard, or seen ads either. But it's not a good defense for viewability. But the only reason I think that this is an important thing is that for digital, we can measure viewability and we can make digital much more efficient. And we should use that argument rather than say, well, you can't view in other media either. But we can measure it in digital, and I think this makes digital more efficient and it makes the case for investing more into digital. If we do this, it'll enable us to have better quality inventory, and that's good news for most of you who are premium publishers. It'll attract investment. It'll regain the trust of clients some of whom see digital a little bit as the Wild West and say, you know what, if I invest 100 GRPs on television, at least I know there may be inefficiencies, but at least I know what will happen to brand lift. I'll know what will happen to in-store sales, and that's maybe a safer place for me to put my money. Those clients, we need to regain their trust, and I think viewability will be part of that. It also allows us to compare to other media in a better way. When the viewability definitions first came out in the US, and the Media Ratings Council, which defined viewability, defined it as 50% in view for 1 second. And our clients said, hang on a minute, but that's not comparable. I'm used to television where at least the whole ad is displayed. And a lot of the money that's coming from analog media into digital is coming via those brand advertisers who are moving money from television into digital, and they need to feel comfortable with the measurement. It also, it's difficult. We need a global standard. We need a global standard because how do you go to someone in Belgium and say the standard in Belgium is lower than the standard in the UK? How do you explain that? We need one standard across the world, and GroupM have come up with their standard, and we're applying that same standard across the world as well. And we said it a little earlier, viewability is a currency based on audience, not gross impressions. These are real human beings who are viewing an ad. And all we're asking of publishers is that we give our clients a fair opportunity, our clients' ads a fair opportunity to see. We're not talking about engagement here. We're just talking about the ad needs to be on screen, viewable for enough time for it to register as an ad. The ad needs to do the rest of the work. So it's just a fair opportunity to see. If the ad is not visible, excuse me, if the ad is not visible, it's not a fair opportunity to see. And unsurprisingly, and clients like this very much, unsurprisingly, the more viewable the ad is, the more the ads work, and the more the client sells goods, and the more. So you'll see that if the ad is at least 55% viewable, it's 118, an 18% lift, but it goes up and up and up the more viewable the ad is. And so what we're trying to do, of course, is optimize to the most viewable inventory, because the most viewable inventory gives our clients the most sales lift. I'm not going to dwell on this. This presentation is available. Claire has a copy, and I'm very happy for it to be shared out. But the Media Ratings Council, which is the media auditing organization for the US, set digital viewability standards, which are at the top. You'll see that the Group M standards are more robust, because whilst we hugely appreciate the work that the MRC has done to create standards and to create benchmarks, we saw these as minimum benchmarks. And when we talked to our clients said, I don't want 50% of my ad to be viewed, I want 100% of it to be viewed, particularly if it's comparable to television. So certainly for premium media and for premium video, it has to be 100%. And not just 100%, but user-initiated, sound on, and 50% completed. And that's what the Group M standard is, and that's the Group M standard that is being rolled out globally. So I wanted to get to this slide because I think perhaps this could be instructive for many of you, is as viewability starts rolling out in the UK, what would our advice be to you, having been through the process for the last 2.5 years in the US? It all starts with measurement. And the first thing you need to do is pair up with a reliable viewability technology provider. Group M has gone through, we've gone through our third range of audits. And what started off as viewability providers have become hybrid viewability, fraud, and piracy providers, because our clients really don't want to pay for each of those measurements individually. But start talking to viewability providers and start selecting them. And if you can, select the same vendor as the major agency groups. This will help a lot, and so you may need to move. Therefore, you may need to use more than one viewability provider. But the reason for this is that there's always likely to be a discrepancy between one viewability provider and another. And so if you're using viewability provider A and the agency is using provider B, and there are discrepant numbers of 30 and 40%, it always requires a hell of a lot of time to reconcile those. But if it's the same vendor, and you and the agency have both said, we both trust this vendor, it makes that process a hell of a lot easier, particularly when you start reconciling on viewability numbers. In the US, with 95% of our publisher partners, we're now paying only for human viewable impressions. So we're actually reconciling or paying only on viewable. It may take a while for that to happen here and elsewhere in Europe, but that's where ultimately everybody will get to, and that's where having measurements sync up is very, very important. The other thing we've seen, and we would ask you to resist this, is stacking as many ads in the viewable frame as you possibly can. And we're still having them jump around saying, hey, I'm viewable, because that leads to ad blocking, big time. And I think that ad blocking is another serious byproduct of this business that if we don't resolve it relatively quickly, we're not going to have an audience to advertise to. And it's going to be very, very difficult and very expensive for us to reach those audiences. So I think be responsible by doing this. I think that the temptation to monetize and gain revenue from this process is obviously an urgent one. But bear in mind that at the end of the day, your users are the ones that are the most important in this process, and we have to make sure that you don't alienate them. Discuss your viewability expectations with the agency. This is a complex issue, and it's a multi-layered issue. So wherever you can, proactively go and see your agency and say, hey, how do you want to manage viewability? Where is your head at with standards? Because obviously the standards aren't out in the UK, and so start off that discussion as early as you can. Try and have a look at your page template redesign. Excuse me, and try and eliminate as many non-viewable placements like below the fold. If you have a look at a number of the publisher websites, there's a lot of inventory that is non-viewable. Try and figure out how you can make it viewable without having all of the ads take over the page entirely. But it's a good time to review your template design. Allow your tags to load asynchronously. This is more of an ad blocking issue, but if all your tags load together, it slows the page down enormously. And now that we're going to be measuring, viewability and fraud and all those other things, that means that there are extra tags that are going to be placed on all of the ads, because one of the things that you have to do when you measure, of course, is have all the creative assets tagged. Make sure that they load more smoothly. You can reduce latency by having them load asynchronously. Limits file size, again, a bit of an ad blocking issue, but at the same time as you're chatting to agencies, say, 250K, I think that the IAB lean standards are probably likely to be around 250K, whatever they are. 250K is the ideal file size. Please don't give us a meg or a meg and a half, because it slows down the page load. So you can start having those discussions now. Have your video players, your user-initiated video players, to sound on. The consumer can always turn them off if they want to, but if a lot of websites you have to click it on and then have the sound go on, people like Group M will not want to pay for ads like that, because part of the Group M viewability standard is sound on. So have the sound on if somebody clicks on the ad, as long as it's user generated. And lastly, if you have multiple sites, when you start working with tech vendors like Moat and Integral Ad Science and Double Verifier, and there are a number of good quality sites out there, tech vendors out there, start measuring the viewability of your own sites and then say, which sites generate the best viewability, and leverage the learnings of those players to your other sites. So here's just some tips that you might find useful in your journey as you start with viewability. I think probably the most important one is here: get together with your agency, and if you have direct clients, get together with them as soon as possible and proactively have this discussion. Does it work? You betcha, as I say in my hometown. We don't have numbers that go back further than this, but in the last 18 months, this is what's happened to viewability amongst all of Group M inventory in the US, as measured by Moat, which is one of our partners. And you can see that against the Group M standards, we started off at a 21% viewability rate, and we're now running at 55%. But the same thing has happened with the MRC standards, which are a little bit more relaxed, and those have increased. So that the overall viewability level it's lifted all boats, and it's been great news for Group M's preferred partners. And the business has definitely shifted towards the more viewable vendors and away from the less viewable vendors. Good news again for you guys in the room. This always comes up. So what do we do with pricing? And so obviously, we have non-viewable ads, and at the moment they're being monetized. What do we do? And it's every single one of our clients asks us, okay, so is it going to be worth my while? Because somewhere along the line, someone's got to pay for this, right? And but actually, quite the opposite has happened. And this is where we come back to the importance of an ad that is not seen has no value. We have to start changing the way we count and measure. And if we start measuring the cost per human viewable impression, And if around 50% of ads aren't being seen, because today still 50% of ads are still not being seen, that if you think you're paying a $10 CPM, you're not. You're paying a $20 CPM. And what we found is we've managed to keep our viewable costs to around 30 or 35% higher than our CPM costs. So it's been a great bargain for our clients. And as long as we measure against human viewable. And it's a big change, and in fact, some of our clients are incentivized as part of their remuneration on CPMs, and so it's a difficult conversation. But we do need to go there, and it all starts with the assumption that an ad that is not seen has no value. All right, I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions a little later, but that's my piece. Thank you.